Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And as mentioned, Henri from the Hong Kong FinTech Association will not be here today, but we have a couple of videos. I'm going to ask some questions. The format would be we'll play his videos, and then we'll follow up with the other associations in Singapore and from FOAM. Okay? So maybe before we start off, we can introduce ourselves, a little bit about yourself, the association, what you do. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Hock. I'm the CEO and co-founder for Switchnovi, which is an enterprise blockchain startup. But today I'm wearing the hat for my night job. I'm also the founding president for the Singapore FinTech Association, which is a cross-industry non-profit organization set up to support the growth of the FinTech sector in Singapore. I believe we should be one of the most active FinTech associations in the world. We have 350 corporate members and international partnerships in 40 countries. My previous life, I spent 2 years in a government agency and 17 years in the financial services industry. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Hock Lai. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wilson. It's good to be back at this panel. Before I joined into the FinTech bandwagon, I was working in the largest listed bank in Malaysia. And about 3 years back, I co-founded the FinTech Association of Malaysia with a group of FinTech players and also a few representatives of FIs. Today, FinTech Association of Malaysia, we have more than 100 members locally, and we closely bridge the different industry players with multiple stakeholders, ranging from regulators to industry partners, investors, and also regional players. So it is a privilege to be here, and we look forward to having a more interesting discussion.
Great, thanks guys. So my name's Arthur, and I'm the CMO for Fusang, and we're building Asia's premier digital securities exchange right out of Labuan. We're also part of the, building the formation of the Labuan FinTech Association, and it's been quite exciting to be a moderator on this panel because I can learn from you two guys. So so I think let's just start off with our questions. The first one being is around the region, in the respective region that the association operates. What were the milestones for the year, and what may we look forward to in 2020? So I think we're going to actually hear Henri's question first, or answer, on video. Give it a second.
Good afternoon to you all. Unfortunately, today is our annual FinTech Association annual drink, so unfortunately I cannot be with you all. But hopefully with this video I can share some of the thoughts and ideas with you all there in Kuala Lumpur today. First, when it comes to the big developments of 2019, there's been a number of developments that I found were really, really exciting. The two that I particularly like were really the launch of the virtual banks in Hong Kong. As many of you know, the HKMA approved 8 new virtual banks. And this is really going to bring new energy, life, and offering, especially for customers, on the banking scene in Hong Kong. And very, very excited to see other countries in the region, from Thailand to Taiwan to Singapore, also launch similar initiatives, and that's going to be very exciting for the months ahead. Another big development that I found very interesting the last year was regulatory clarity on digital assets. For example, again in Hong Kong, the regulator issued guidance on crypto exchanges. So for now, if a crypto exchange wants to come and set up presence in Hong Kong, they know exactly what the rules and requirements are. And that's one thing the crypto community has been asking for a long time, regulatory clarity. When it comes to 2020, there's a lot of exciting things that I'm following up as well. On the crypto team, now that we have regulatory clarity, I'm looking forward to having some more tax clarity. Because whether we want or not, we still have to pay tax on digital assets. Another big development I'm watching as well is with the launch of these digital or virtual banks, what are some of the new offerings that customers will be able to benefit? For example, financial health. Today I'll go to the gym for my physical health. I'll meditate or I pray for my mental or spiritual health. But why am I not using FinTech for my financial health? And this is one thing that these virtual banks can hopefully change. Hope this is useful.
I was really hoping to see some protesters in the background. Oh my gosh. it's too tame for me. Okay, Hock Lai, love to hear it from you.
Yeah, I think most of you will know that like Singapore and Hong Kong are very similar in many ways. In many ways, we are also competing. So you have a digital banking license in Hong Kong that sort of catalyzed the introduction of digital banking license in Singapore. So end of this month will be the closing date. By mid of next year, 5 digital banking licenses will be issued. Similarly, like while Singapore started the Payment Services Act, which will come in effect in January 28th, 2020, Hong Kong also came up with a similar set of regulations. But I would like to focus more on like what the Fintech Association of Singapore has accomplished in 2020. I think this has been our best year, but also the busiest year. In terms of like membership, like we have like now we have 350 corporate members. 80% of our corporate members are fintech and blockchain companies. We have like 56 partnerships in 40 countries. So it's an increase from 30 over last year. And then this year, this is the first time that we start bringing our members overseas. So this year, we actually brought them to 6 countries. Yeah, so quite massive, bringing them to Cambodia, to London, to Kenya, to China, to Taipei, etc. So, and riding on that, because like the fintech story of Singapore, because Singapore is actually a very small market, a population size of 5.6 million. Although when we talk about B2B fintech, Singapore is still quite an attractive market with more than 200 financial institutions and 7,000 MNCs. But when we are talking about B2C fintech, right, you have to look at the region. That's why helping our members to internationalize is important. That's why I always ask our members, just go overseas, go to Malaysia, go to Taiwan, go to China, just set up your shop there, because the world is your market. Yeah. And the other thing is that this year is also our first year to organize the FinTech Award, because I think what is different from other FinTech Awards, because I think all other FinTech Awards are about the FinTech companies. So this year in September, we actually organized the first FinTech Awards for the Asia region, and I think it was quite well attended. More than 300 packs came over, but it is also a way for us, for the association, to generate revenue so that we can be more sustainable. And with learning from this year, next year we are going to do something bigger, at least twice the size. And also this year is the first time we actually set up a Singapore pavilion in the Singapore FinTech Festival. I mean, just a show of, anyone attended the Singapore FinTech Festival this year? Quite a handful. So this year, I mean, as you know, more than 60,000 visitors from 40 countries. So in the past, I always tell, delegates who visit Singapore, right, it's actually called FinTech tourism. It's not just FinTech Festival, because people come to Singapore, right, not just for the conference, but also to wine and dine, visit the places of interest. But this year, I have to coin another name called FinTech Marathon, because over 3 days, I walked 65,000 steps. That is the size of the festival. So this year, we actually set up the very first Singapore pavilion. 22 of our members actually house under the pavilion. And throughout the whole week, we actually organize 7 side events so that all our international guests, they have something to do every day. Yeah, so that is also actually our product that generate revenue for the association. Looking forward to, actually the other thing is that this year we started our first corporate CSR program. We call it FinTech for Schools. Basically, we went to all the upper secondary schools to share with them what kind of FinTech rules are available and what do we expect to work in the FinTech industry. Over a period of 6 months, we actually reached out to more than 4,000 students. Yeah. So looking forward for the year 2020 is a bit premature for me to forecast now, because we are also like a startup. But a few things came into mind that we'll be doing, other than doing what we are already doing this year. One is that we are likely to organize a FinTech in Asia conference. This one is a collaboration among the different Asia FinTech associations. So watch out for that. The other thing that we started to do will be what we call a FinTech exchange. So basically, we'll work with a few countries. Basically, we'll help each other's FinTech to accelerate. So for example, our collaboration with Taiwan, they will send their FinTech companies to Singapore. We'll help them to meet up with investors, but also to find local partners. So we are actually helping them, giving a guiding hand for them to scale up in Singapore and in Southeast Asia, and vice versa in Taiwan. Yeah. So that's what I have for this.
Great, that's a lot of work. How about Wilson?
Sure. And thanks for the contagious energy from both Hock and Henri. Even Henri is 100 miles away. You can sense that he is very passionate, and also our dear friend down south as well. I think it's without a doubt that Hong Kong and Singapore, they are global financial centers. And of course, they have certain advantages. Whereas in Malaysia, if you look at our financial system and our unique value propositions, I would say that as per a recent report by EY, Malaysia is considered as one of the leading fintech hub for emerging markets. And this is where the Fintech Associations of Malaysia comes in after 3 years into establishment. I think this year there are a few notable progress or items achieved by the association. First of all, I think it is our closeness in terms of working more closely with the regulators. For example, in June this year, Bank Negara Malaysia organized the first or inaugural My FinTech Week. It was the first international FinTech conference in Malaysia. Whereas the audience was actually more catered to our local market, but the content, the speakers, they were from internationals. And it's a bit different from SFF, which I've been attending without fail in the past 4 years. And this is number one. Number two is that there are 5 key pillars of strategy that FAOM is focusing in this year. Number one, we strongly believe that the fintech ecosystem, particularly in Malaysia, would not able to grow without having a strong pipeline of talents. So this is where we are working closely with a few tertiary institutions, universities, and also industry partners to develop courses in fintech, to train bankers who are thinking to leave conventional banking to jump into the fintech bandwagon. We are coming out with certain training materials, how they can be more prepared, and also the younger generations on what is fintech, what is innovation. So this is number one. Number two, we also focus in funding. As you know, the funding concentration today lies mainly in Singapore. Most of the VCs, PEs, they are in Singapore and also Hong Kong. So the question is, how can we attract the right investment or funding into Malaysia? I think it is safe to say that for the more matured fintech companies, Series B and above, they have less difficulty in accessing funding domestically and regionally. But for the pre-Series A or pre-Series B, from our understanding and engagement, some of them face some stumbling block. So this is where we are working very closely with different funders or even government agencies to see how best we can bridge the gap. Third is what we call the storytelling pillar. I think we have a lot to learn from Singapore to do a better storytelling on what Malaysia has to offer, or even what Labuan has to offer to the world and the region. And I think with the crowd at the last panel, it is a great testament that there's a lot of interest in Labuan, and I would say this is a great job done by Farah and the team. So we are also working very closely to see how best we can craft a better story to help spur fintech investment and development in Malaysia. We have a few key UVPs, just to name a few. We are lower costs in terms of running the businesses, but lower cost doesn't mean that we are compromising on quality. I would say that our talents are quite well diverse. Secondly, I think Islamic finance is something that we can further strengthen when it comes to injecting innovation. And of course, third, I think Labuan as a mid-shore financial center can be really further enhanced and marketed to the region and the world. So this is the third pillar. The fourth pillar, I would say that it is a lot to do with technology implementation. I think if you look at most of the fintech companies here in Malaysia, the innovation is still mainly seen in some of the other countries, such as US or China. So the question is, how can we work with different stakeholders to really ensure that there's a technological innovation among the fintech players? And last but not least, it is the environment. I think the past 2 years after the Fintech Association was set up, we have been working very hard to get so-called an endorsement from key industry players. I think this year we are seen to be more credible in the industry side of things. We have a board seat in MIPC, Malaysia Innovation Public Council. Our president, Mr. Rizwan, he is also an international advisory panel in Labuan. So this is where we have to ensure that the environment at large is positive to nurture more young fintech entrepreneurs, more bankers who are able to innovate, and also last but not least, to attract incoming businesses, whether they are from the region or international, and also to spur our local businesses to go abroad. Thank you.
That's great. So a lot of work being done, a lot of progress. If you're looking at next year for existing or new fintech startups or projects, even though they might be in corporations, what do you see as maybe two of the biggest challenges for next year? Like last year, as Henri was talking about, is regulatory clarity. But in your jurisdictions, what is that challenge? What are the major challenges?
I think one challenge I can think of is that the fintech industry in Singapore is now 4 years old. As you know, right, the failure rate of startups will be high. So I think probably we will see more casualties in next year. Yeah, but we will also see some of the fintech players getting even more successful as the industry starts to consolidate. Actually, the other challenge that previously we faced in Singapore was the lack of late-stage funding. Previously, I mean, it's quite easy to get seed or angel funding in Singapore. We even have a story of like $0 startup because there were so many accelerator programs in Singapore that you don't need any funding because you just jump from one accelerator to another and you can last for a few years. But 2 years back, it was quite challenging for a lot of the startups to get late-stage funding. I think that was resolved since late last year. In Singapore, we streamlined venture capital regulations 2 years back to make it more cost-effective for VCs and PEs to set up shop in Singapore. So I think that is the positive effects are coming. First 9 months of this year, Singapore garnered about 1 billion in Sing dollar in terms of fintech investments. And currently there should be close to 300 PC and VC firms. So I think that challenge has been resolved. Again, I think the other challenge I see a lot of startups will be about scaling up because they are way past in coming up with a product. Now is getting the products in as many countries as possible. But of course, the challenge for a fintech product or solution is that it's in a very heavily regulated industry, so it's not easy to scale up. So I think these are the challenges I can think of.
I think in our market, there are a couple of challenges, one of which is the understanding towards fintech. But of course, I'm not addressing towards the crowd this hall. I think most of the urban professionals, urban folks would understand how fintech can be integral or be part of their life. But if you look into some of the secondary cities, kampongs in East Malaysia, I think the question is, how can we market and educate this underserved segment to really understand fintech and subsequently to adopt fintech to their benefit? And of course, I'm also referring not just individuals, but also small, medium businesses or even micro, small, medium businesses to adopt fintech technology. So this is where we are seeing the flow of information is very important when it comes to fintech developments, fintech update, to be explained in a layman terms. I think in Malaysia, of course, apart from the business portals, and I was also checking out the Labuan FSA website, Labuan IBFC website. I think it is very well maintained. I can refer to all the past presentation slides, and the language used is very simple. And I think today in the hall, we also have Fintech News Malaysia, who has been promoting and marketing the key updates or the pulse of the industry to the mass public. So I think the flow of information is very key to help the mass market to understand fintech. And this is linked to my second point, which we believe that fintech essentially is an ecosystem building effort. Nowadays, people talk about ecosystem banking, right? Ecosystem insurance, ecosystem fintech. And I think that fintech is, although it's standalone, but it is part and parcel of our daily life. From when we wake up, to make a transaction, and to board a plane to buy a travel insurance, to sending money to your kids overseas, is part and parcel of your lifestyle. So the question is, how can we ensure that all the key stakeholders within the ecosystems are on the same wavelength, and hence the fullest potential of fintech can be harnessed? So since today is 12th December, I will share a personal story that I experienced. So any one of you has bought something on any of the e-commerce platform already? So it's 12/12. So I had the opportunity to undergo an intensive 2 weeks training in Hangzhou, in Alibaba HQ, early this year. So as you know, Jack Ma has retired, so he is spending a lot of time to nurture the next batch of digital entrepreneurs in emerging market. So the batch from Malaysia, we actually went to visit a kampong. It is called Pai Niu Chun, Pai Niu Village. It is about 105 km away from Hangzhou. So the history of Pai Niu Chun, this Pai Niu Village, before about 7 years ago, they were just a normal and typical rural village. There are about 1,600 residents in Pai Niu Chun. And they were witnessing brain drain issue, right? The younger generation, they went to work in Shanghai, in Hangzhou, they would never want to come back unless it is a Chunjie, which is their Lunar New Year. They came back for 2 weeks. So how Alibaba, as an ecosystem player, they came to Pai Niu Chun in the past few years, and they have reshaped the livelihood and the destiny of the residents in Pai Niu Chun. So I will share a bit more in details, and I'll connect back to fintech ecosystem. So the 1,600 residents in Pai Niu Chun, today, there are more than 20% of them are involved directly in e-commerce, number one. So they get online to sell their products, not just to the villagers, but to the entire China. So number one. And secondly, they also have a specialized product that they are able to offer. So in this particular village, they are specializing in healthy nuts, right? If you check out your Taobao or whatnot, you can see actually it's produced and manufactured at Pai Niu Chun. And third, it's not just about online e-commerce. There's a logistic network enabled by the China Alliance, which help the goods to be transported from Pai Niu village within 24 hours to the coastal cities of China, and within 36 hours to every part of China. So there's also a delivery. And last but not least, there's also training given to these residents or the villagers to learn to adopt e-commerce, fintech payment. Of course, Alipay or other fintech payment is there to enable the seamless transaction. So it struck me very strongly that, hey, to grow innovation in a community, it requires an ecosystem. Just like the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a kid. And I think in Malaysia, particularly as an emerging country or as an immediate upper income nation, we need these different stakeholders to come in. So it's not just about one particular stakeholder, the fintech players trying to shape the world. It also requires the fintech players to work with non-fintech players to allow them to see the benefits so that the ultimate consumers can be benefited.
That's great. So I'm part of the Hong Kong FinTech Association. Been for about 3 years now. And this next question is about the experience that the association has gone through working with regulators, particularly creating a sandbox, educating different industries, getting auditors involved, getting legal involved to understand these policies and guidelines, opinions that are coming out. And pretty much everyone has a different perspective of whether or not it's working. I think on the most part, people are quite happy, at least it's inching forward, right? So the question is, and this is a question that we'll hear from Henri through video as well, is that what is your personal view on the different regulatory approaches and ethos that have been taken thus far towards managing fintech solutions and companies? So we'll hear from Henri really quickly.
Over the last couple of months, we've seen different approaches to fintech. For example, a lot of the banks or financial institutions have launched innovation teams or a chief innovation officer or other initiatives of the kind. In practice, their success has been quite mitigated. While an innovation team looks great for PR purposes in the CEO of a speech, or when you have kids from schools visiting your business and you can see some people in shorts and t-shirts, and actually in practice, their impact has been quite limited. Many of them were not given the right amount of budget, they were not given the right amount of authority inside the firm, and in many cases, the management of the team didn't have the will to implement these big changes. And actually that's the one big differentiator. The banks and financial institutions where we have seen fintech be successfully be integrated are the organization from the top down. There was a clear direction and lead and belief in changing the organization, where the CEO was leading by example by embracing fintech and encouraging the staff to embrace it as well. For example, we've been hearing stories of business leaders telling their staff that they do not work at a bank anymore, but a tech firm. And if they're not happy, the door is there and they can leave. And these organizations are the ones who have been successful in really embracing fintech inside the organization. Also encouraging people to fail. I think for a financial organization to be successful with fintech, they need to not only encourage people to try and fail, but even promote people who have failed. And that's something we do not do in banks today. And this, by the way, also applies to regulatory bodies. The same innovation mindset of thinking outside the box, pushing the boundaries, applies not only to financial institutions, but regulators as well. And that's one thing we'd like to see more in 2020.
You guys aligned with his message? Innovation. What do you think?
Maybe I'll speak from the perspective as someone in Singapore. I think currently the playbook for innovation by regulators are already quite well known. The usual ones, first of all, you set up a fintech office. You will become the first stop of inquiry for businesses who are keen to know that whether this new business model requires licensing and which licensing. So I think many jurisdictions already had that. Then the second one will be a regulatory sandbox. Singapore was the third country to implement that after UK and Australia. But even operating a regulatory sandbox, I think you will need to calibrate it according to the conditions in your country. Like for Singapore, actually our regulatory sandbox, I think so far, only about 8 companies has gone into the regulatory sandbox. Because for Singapore, we took a different position that only if your business model is really innovative, then you get in. Yeah, that's why not many companies are inside there. But if you compare that to UK, I think they have close to 80 graduates from the sandbox. Because for UK, their mandate is different. They are promoting competition. So they want to unleash more competition into the financial services industry. So it really depends on your particular condition in your country. I think the third thing is about building fintech bridges at the government-to-government level. For MAS, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, they built 25 collective agreements because fintech was and is still quite new to many people. So sharing of information will be important. And then I feel that just having the regulator doing all this will not be sufficient. That's why I agree with what Wilson said. I mean, ecosystem approach is important. That's where I think FinTech Association can play a very big role, because at the grassroots level, I mean, you can have the most fantastic policy, but if at the grassroots level nothing is happening, you are not going to attract, you are not going to become a vibrant FinTech ecosystem. Which is why, for example, like for Singapore FinTech Association, 2 years back, we already started reskilling and upskilling people into FinTech. And obviously, 2 years ago, there are not many practitioners in FinTech, so there's no lecturers in all the polytechnics of all the universities. So what we did is we do crowdsourcing. We actually crowdsource to the practitioners in Singapore, and we are lucky in Singapore because there are many FinTech companies in Singapore. I think in Singapore, we have close to 600 over FinTech companies, and that's about 40% of all the FinTech companies in Southeast Asia. So we're lucky as in like we have ready practitioners there to do the sharing. And so in many ways, the FinTech Association complement what the regulator can do. And it's only through this close collaboration between the regulator and the FinTech Association, we can push elevate the development of the FinTech industry. In fact, our regulators are within WhatsApp reach to one another. We even have a WhatsApp group whereby the regulators is in there to get the ground feedback to the regulators. Yeah.
I echo what Hock Lai has just mentioned. It's very important to engage closely with the regulators, because this clarity in regulation is one key important factor, especially for FinTech companies to model their business direction moving forward. So in June this year, the FinTech Association of Malaysia actually hosted an industry-wide engagement session. In this case, it was with Bank Negara Malaysia, in tandem or in conjunction with My FinTech Week. So we actually invited key startups or industry players to join the session, where they had the face-to-face engagement with Assistant Governor of Bank Negara and also the Director of the Bank Negara team, who looks after FinTech and innovation. So after that session, we were also given the go-ahead to organize more regular sessions between FinTech companies, essentially the industry players, and also regulators. Because when we sat down with regulators, they actually asked us a few questions. They were telling us, when it comes to clarity in regulation, what exactly is the issue? Is it lacking in information? But that is not really the case, because most of the consultative paper, exposure draft, or even the process to enter a sandbox are public, right? So we realized that the key item would be about the engagement with regulators. It could be with their working level, so that our FinTech players can understand better. So I myself also run a FinTech startup. I also underwent similar experience when it comes to thinking whether to enter into sandbox or applying after a license or approval, which is already in place. So my company, end of last year, we actually started the engagement with the central bank in this case for insurance. So after describing our business plan, our mission and vision, the Bank Negara team was actually advising us to go after the full-fledged framework, which is already in place. So I just want to demystify the idea that if you are a FinTech players, you must go into the sandbox, right? It doesn't mean that case. And of course, taking a step back, in Malaysia, we have a few regulators. It's not just Bank Negara. We also have Securities Commission of Malaysia. I think they also have their own platform and avenue to engage with FinTech companies through their SC Affinity or SC times SC, and of course, Labuan FSA, and also event like today. It gives a very good platform for us to engage directly with the influencers, in Labuan. And of course, we also hope to work closely with the Labuan FinTech Association to really help educate the public and engage the industry players with the regulators.
Yeah. So this is let's look at it from the other side, in a sense, from I believe many of the companies, fintech companies, they all have different agendas, they all have different challenges, looking for different answers. So I think if you think about where in the minds of the regulators, it's a lot to manage, right? So let me ask you guys, imagine that you had a job and you were a regulator, right? With your understanding of what's going on, what approach would you take? Anything different? Any new ideas that you would try to, create that catalyst to accelerate the understanding, education, innovation, whatnot? What would you do?
I think the challenge for me is that MES, Singapore is already doing a fantastic job. But if there's one thing I would like to change is that they should have funded fintech association right from the start. 3 years back, a lot of things would have accelerated because we were unfunded for 2 years. And since you are starting a Labuan fintech association, some experiences, because not all your board members is going to work because it's an 80-20 rule. But bulk of the work will be done by 20% of the member. But you need the community to support you. And I think this is the one factor that the SFA can be so active, because right from the start we have received a lot of support from the community. I think I shared with a few of you that, for example, we don't pay office rental at all because we collaborated with one of the biggest fintech co-working space, 80RR. So in return for free rental of office space, we bring community and content to the space. Yeah, we don't pay for legal fees because we work with Linklaters. They provide pro bono legal services. In return, they get to host all the consultation paper by MES. So indirectly, they are getting leads somewhere else. We also don't pay for PR, public relations, because we have Asia PR Works that provide all the public comms services to us. And if you look at our activity level, we have a lot. We have a lot of media release. So there's a lot of work. And then in return, as much as possible, when I have potential leads, right, I pass it to them. And last but not least, we don't pay for the president. So he also worked for free for the last 3 years. Yeah. So I can tell you it's a full-time commitment, especially in Singapore, because the activity level for fintech and blockchain is so high. Yeah, so something to watch out for. Thanks.
I love that. I need to talk to you some more after this. Buy you a drink. How about yourself?
I think to give credit to Hock as well, when I was in Singapore FinTech Fest at the Singapore Pavilion that he mentioned, the Prime Minister of Singapore, Mr. Lee, actually visited the pavilion. And of course, I think Hock had the opportunity to also share with him some of the key updates. And it shows that to really grow the fintech ecosystem, the bottom-up approach is important, but the top-down approach is also equally significant. So in Malaysia, similarly, the Fintech Association in Malaysia, the members or the elected members, we are all working on a pro bono basis. But the difference is that we have not been funded by any regulator. But this year, we have passed through a resolution in our EGM, which enables the association to set up a council by inviting seasoned industry players to sit in the council. Because when we went to the market to talk about funding or sponsorship, one of the key questions they may ask, or they would have asked, is that the longevity and also the sustainability of the working level of the association, because it is elected on an annual basis, right? So it's very important to give our partners and supporters the credibility and also the trust that there's a working group which will continue the legacy and also the plans outlined by the FinTech Association, no matter which committee members are in the association. So this is something that we are working. Secondly, this is also arising from our engagement in My FinTech Week. We are in the midst of developing what we call a national FinTech blueprint. You may have read about it in some of the news media. I think Rizwan may have shared. So essentially, the National FinTech Blueprint is a condensation and consolidation of all the key important information about fintech in Malaysia. And this will be in the form of website, and it will be made public to all the key players. So this is work in progress. We hope that we will be able to launch it to the public next year.
Okay, thanks. So both your associations doing a lot of great work. It's been consistently heard throughout this session. Next question is actually for the whole panel, and we'll hear from Henri again. But it's more about, besides your associations, what other players, what other organizations, associations do you see have been making like strong impact in this space? So we'll just play this video quickly. Yeah.
I believe that fintech associations have a big role to play in the fintech ecosystem in Asia. For example, often I think there's not enough collaboration. Again, when a lot of foreign fintechs are looking into Asia, we tend to often tell them it's either Hong Kong versus Singapore, it's Thailand versus Malaysia. But actually, for a lot of these foreign firms looking to come into Asia, they often look at Asia as a whole. They look at Hong Kong and Singapore, Thailand and Malaysia. And I think that's one of the things that fintech associations have a big role to play. Really to show that we are regionally really an important player in fintech. Because let's not forget, when it comes to B2C fintech, China is 2 or 3 years ahead of the rest of the world. And actually the region benefits from this uplift from what's happening in China. We often tell executives that if they want to see where the future of finance is, they shouldn't go to Silicon Valley, but they should rather come here to Asia to see what the opportunity really is. I think that's something that's very important, and fintech associations have a big role to play. Not only in actually creating joint events, meetings together, signing MOUs, but really try to bring the ecosystem together. And this is why I really believe that if we do so, it's not a 1 + 1 = 2 relationship, but a 1 + 1 = 3, and probably even more relationship. And that's why I'm very, very bullish on the role and the importance that fintech associations have in fintech in Asia.
I agree with that. Yes, we've been saying it all afternoon. So other associations that caught your eye, really, making a huge impact in their space, or even like a specific person that you want to call in a note?
Maybe I can talk a little bit more on the collaboration part. Early on, I mentioned about the fintech in Asia. That is something that we discussed among a few of the fintech associations, including Fintech Association of Malaysia and Taiwan, of like having these each country holding their own fintech awards, and then every year we rotate to hold that the Asia Top 10 Fintech Awards. Yeah, so that is one form of collaboration, and to me, that is one of the easiest way, but we have to start from somewhere first. So I'm looking forward to the fintech in Asia. The other thing I want to talk about is also what I call fintech inclusion, because many times when we talk about fintech, we talk about financial inclusion, right? Allowing the unbanked and underbanked to have access to financial services. But do you know that similarly, a lot of the small and medium-sized banks have the same issue. They don't have the big budget of the big banks to have access to the latest technology or innovation, which is why I participated in the advisory committee for ASEAN Fintech Innovation Network, which is a joint venture between the MAS and International Finance Corporation, IFC, which is a subsidiary of World Bank. So basically, AFIN, they created this platform called APIX, which is an API marketplace, whereby fintech companies from all over the world, they can put their APIs onto this platform. And on the other hand, ASEAN banks also participate in this platform. Because one of the key challenges for many of the fintech is who to talk to in the bank, right? Very often, even if you found the right person to talk to, right, the whole POC process will take at least 9 months. 3 months you talk to IT, 3 months you talk to compliance, 3 months you talk to business. With this API platform, there's a proper KYC and onboarding process. So that will actually green lane the company to work with the bank. And this platform also has a sandbox environment so that the POC can be accelerated. So this is also one form of collaboration, not just within a domestic country, but at a more regional level. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are a few key stakeholders in which their contribution is very significant and important to spur the development of fintech in Malaysia. The one that I can name, first of all, I think the government is playing a very crucial role. And I think it's quite encouraging to see that in the recent budget 2020, there are a few key initiatives announced, which were in relation to fintech or developing cashless society and also encouraging small, medium businesses to adopt e-terminal, e-post terminal, and other initiatives. So I think that is a good sign. Secondly, it will be government agencies. As you know, we have multiple government agencies, and there are a few government agencies which have been really helping the local startup ecosystem, not just in fintech, but from different other verticals from day one. I think they also still play a very important role. And the third, I would say that it is really from the media. I think media also plays a very crucial role in terms of broadcasting the right fintech message to the community. As I mentioned earlier, to the non-fintech community. How does fintech impact in their daily life? I think media plays a very important role. And of course, the education institutions will be also very, very crucial in terms of really integrating fintech training, financial education training into their core curriculum. And you can see that in some of the more advanced countries or some of the leading tertiary institutions, they have been offering short-term fintech courses. I think from University of Oxford or even in the US, they do it. They do online distant learning to give you certifications. And I think this is something that we hope that locally our institution can also do the same. But of course, all in all, I still believe that it requires a center point to connect all these different parties together so that there's no discrepancy in terms of information disbursement. Because when we engage with some of the startups or even foreign player, when we spoke to them, they will ask, there are just too many different stakeholders in Malaysia. Who should I talk to? Where should I go? So this is where the Fintech Association, we hope that we can step up, we can improve to play this role so that the information dissemination is efficient.
Yeah, I definitely think it's important to align the interests of your stakeholders to serve the community. And there are a lot of businesses, as I mentioned, with different outcomes that they want to achieve. So let me ask you, as a new business, a new individual member wanting to join your association, what is your reason? Like, what is your why? Like, why, what do you tell people? Why join our association? Besides the obvious, like you'll have extended network, we have education, but what is the real value? Or is it that, depending who you talk to, sure, you might give a different reason. But I mean, you're not getting paid. This is your nighttime job. You said you're not getting paid. So why do you do it? Like why, what is the why for your association?
I think for the first 2 years, we didn't actively solicit for membership. It's kind of grow organically because I think the community sees that the association is delivering things. Yeah, and of course the other thing, it helps that our membership fees, I think, should be one of the lowest in the world. For a startup, right, it's just 100 Sing per annum, and we have not increased fees for the last 3 years. Yeah, so, but I think recently, over the last 12 months, members are becoming more demanding. Yeah, which is why we created a few products. I mentioned about the FinTech Awards. So I mentioned about we creating all the different side events. So we are creating more products because they can see that we have built this platform that is internationally recognized. We have a big member base whereby some of the members can sell to other members. We have a big international footprint whereby they can then reach out to when they need to expand. So they see the value. In fact, recently one of the founders who got, who is quite successful, I think they just got their Series C funding. They told me, we are charging too low for the membership fee. They are willing to pay $20,000 a year. they see the value, they participated in all our activities. So I think the value comes from when the members took advantage of the activities organized by the association. I think that's one key point, because if you don't reach out to them, they don't participate, they don't see the value in renewing with you. Yeah.
Agreed.
In this regard, I would break down the composition of our members in 3 categories, because each of them would have different need, and hence our response would have to be different as well. The first category would be the so-called the established players, whether they are established fintech companies or they are FIs. They do not need to go through an association to talk to a regulator. Let's be very honest about it. When it comes to regional connection, they would have their own advisors or consultants. So the question is, so what kind of benefits can we give or offer to these bigger players? And more often than not, the question is also two-way. It's not just about giving, but also what you can add value to the fintech community as a whole, because you have grown sizably over the years. So how can you come in to be part of this community to help the smaller startups, the newer startups to grow and learn? So this is the first category. The second category is more on the emerging startups, emerging fintech players. They have done some MVP. They could be in seed stage or pre-series A stage. This is where the clarity in regulation is very important. This is where exposure locally and also internationally is very important. So this is where we also encourage our startups to participate in Singapore Fintech Festival, the recent Taipei Fintech Festival, and other different events. And last but not least would be in entities which are adding values to the entire fintech scene. For example, your auditors, your accountants, your legal firms, or maybe your strategic consulting firms. So they are also part of the community. So for this group of members, usually they will look into what are the problems they can solve for the members. So this is where we also bridge the ground between these 3 key categories. But of course, all in all, if you ask me, can we do better? Yes, we definitely can do better, and there will be a lot more things that we can deliver to really be on the ground to add values to our members. So in terms of category, we have our affiliate membership. It starts at 100 ringgit. This is for individual. And for corporate, it starts at 500 ringgit if your team is less than 5 people, and so on and so forth. So you can see most of the information on our website, which is fintechmalaysia.org. Thank you.
Okay. So talking about all these issues coming up, the demands of the membership. So is there any, I guess, major demands or that are being asked by your members that you're having a big challenge fulfilling? Like, there may be many, but maybe just name a couple. And what do you plan to do about it?
Recently, we start receiving requests from members who want to tap onto the membership base we already have. Yeah, and so we are still thinking through what is the best way to address that, because I think in a way it's good, because like in the first place, as a fintech association, right? I mean, we could be that very first customer for our members, right? Because like same for many B2B fintech companies, they are only successful after they got their very first bank customer. That's an endorsement of their product, you see. So we are thinking through that. But I think I like the idea that the fintech association can be a customer of our members also. So I think this is something that is quite recent that I can think of.
I always thought it'd be a good match in the sense that the membership base can actually be a pool for your focus group, like your tester base, I guess, right? It's always good because they may not be your end customers exactly, but they'll have a perspective. They'll be trained if they're, let's say, going onto a platform. They've had experience like with usability testing and what to look for, what to expect. I always thought that would be a good idea to actually tap into the expertise more rather than just trying to create partnerships, build more business, but it's more about making a better product overall, better and customer focused.
I totally agree. In the Fintech Association Malaysia, we have subcategories. They are separated according to the verticals that they are in. So we have payments, we have insurtech. We also have one particular vertical which looks after RMOs, the registered market operators. And some of these key category, they were also involved in giving feedback to the regulator, especially when it came to exposure draft. So about 3 months ago, in August, the association actually organized a session to respond to the exposure draft released by Bank Negara, which is related to the online aggregation. So Bank Negara released an online insurance aggregation approval in August. So the association actually organized a meetup with more than 45 key fintech players, aggregators, insurtechs, or even traditional insurers to come together. This was taking place in Sasana Kijang in Bank Negara, where we actually went through point by point in the exposure draft. And collectively, we took note of the industry feedback, and we submitted an industry response to Bank Negara when it came to this exposure draft setting. And the response was also duly noted, and we are looking forward to the release of the final paper. So this is what we have been doing. Early this year, the open API document was released by Bank Negara as well. There was also input from one of the categories under the association. But we are also thinking of ways, hopefully in next year, how can we also reach out to more members so that the involvement and participation can be more meaningful, so that no one is left behind in the entire grand scheme of things in terms of fintech development.
When it comes to content and all these papers that are coming out and research, I think actually it might be a good idea to collectively talk afterwards, because I think one of the things is finding the information online, and whether or not it's up to date is quite hard. Perhaps we can have a depository of some sorts, which would be helpful. I don't know, do you guys do that already?
We actually, this year, we published 3 thought leadership reports.
Right.
One is on fintech talents, to understand what kind of specific roles that are more in shortage, and then what are the employees looking for. The other paper is actually on SME fintech, because actually most SMEs face the key challenges in terms of working capital and cash flow management, and there are many fintech solutions that are quite suitable for them. So we conducted this survey report to understand the currently what are the gaps, and also to raise awareness to all the SMEs the availability of a fintech solution. And the third one is a collaboration with PwC and UOB, which is actually ASEAN fintech from startup to scale up. Actually, this is the third edition. The very first edition done 2 years back was to understand the landscape of fintech in the ASEAN. So this year, the edition focused on startup to scale up, because after 4 years of fintech development in ASEAN, right, quite a number of the fintech now are ready to scale up. So they are facing growing up challenges. So we have been doing all this. In fact, our next thought leadership report will be on digital banking. Yeah. So all these are available on our website to download.
All right, thanks. So what I'd like to do next is actually, I want to, if you guys can stay on stage, I wanted to walk through a brief introduction for the Labuan Fintech Association. Got a few slides. And going to walk through it. And afterwards, I would love any feedback, any comments. I've heard some of yours already. You had no funding when you started. Okay, that's all. That's the only thing that's playing in my head. But anyways, but honestly, look, it was great to have you guys on stage. We talk about ecosystems. We talk about 80-20 rules, the real players who are making impact to make change and push things forward. With the Labuan Fintech Association, I think one of the core principles really is that in order to get to any great achievement, it's got to be done through teamwork. I've been part of probably like 4 startups in the past, And it's very easy to get to a point where you recognize how much you need the community to support your vision, and how much you appreciate it. It's not how many followers you have, but it's how many people that actually supporting and using your product or service. So for us, the mission, and this is just on a very high level, really, we want to support further growth in the digital ecosystem in Labuan IBFC. More so is to actually explain why, the why, and that's something that we're going to look to develop. How we're going to do it, it's very similar to many other organizations, but it's more about advocating with the regulators to make sure that our stakeholders and alignment is in place with the new policies and guidelines coming into place. Of course, creating collaborative opportunities and synergies in partnership within the people in the community. But last but not least is really the action. So at this point, it's nice to have lofty goals, but I think the key thing for the association is to identify a few points, a few initiatives that we fully focus on. We all have day jobs, so we want to make it quite simple. So it's all about taking action and execution. And also we want to take a customer-centric approach, right? So I think because as we're building out the community, that's why I was asking you two about what the members are demanding, right? Sign up on the website, we meet them in person or through video, and we want to understand what their expectations are, what they need, what they want. I'm pretty sure we'll find a lot of commonalities, but we just want to make sure, like when they're coming to the events, they know why they're coming. They know the value. That's what we're trying to align. Of course, we'll do a number of, I guess, different ways to promote these businesses coming on board, either through social or through shared content. So it's going to be very customer-centric. All right. So, yeah, I just want to note that we just had our first kickoff meeting for the association yesterday. I've been quite excited with the amount of interest and companies that have come to us. And we're actually treating this more or less like a startup, right? So you started with no funding. I got a lot of advice from Musher, who started up the one in Hong Kong, where they also had no funding, right? It takes a long time to kind of build up that momentum, and you're kind of behind the game, right? So I think for us, we basically got a number of companies who wanted to be founders, right? Who will be pitching in money, seed money, you can see it, seed money. But of course, now we need to grow it and see how we figure out how to sustain it, right? So we've got a number of law firms, insurance, we got it covered. I guess I can show the broad expertise of individuals in these companies that would be bringing to the FinTech Association. We thought it was very important to have that at the very start, because I think if we're too heavy just on, let's say, on the financial side and not enough on the tech, then it's not so helpful. So we got broad expertise across different verticals. And really for the membership tiers, we're going broad, similar to SFA. We're not going to just limit it to Labuan. We want to open it up to the great interest of any companies who's got any vested interest in the jurisdiction, but also the expertise. So I think this is one of the things that the challenges that we will look forward to solve, because as you mentioned, you've got all these associations, you've got all these great minds, right? Perhaps we can take the 20% that are actually trying to make it happen from every single organization and make up 100%. That would be pretty cool. So we got founders and chairmans. We got partners that we're going to bring in. I think it's very typical bringing in universities, even technology platforms that can support the ecosystem, and other associations. We got some startups, corporates, and individuals, and also students. I think that's be important because we talk about talent pool. We also want to curate that talent that comes in the future, and that's briefly what the presentation that I have. Do you guys have any thoughts to add as far as building out the organization? give me some help.
The first thing you whisper and mention, funding.
Okay.
I think in the end, you have to really run it for the next few years to see what else you can calibrate, because basically this is a typical playbook.
Yep.
Even for when we founded the Singapore Fintech Association, right?
Right.
I'm also the one who built the website and the membership system.
Okay.
I also go to get the initial funding by organizing innovation roundtables. So you have to look for people who can pay. For example, we organize an innovation roundtable, getting all the head of innovation in the banks. And there are people who are willing to pay to get the opportunity to talk to the head of innovations. So these are some of the things you have to look at. Yeah.
Okay.
And for the record, we have been profitable since day one.
Oh,
So
nice.
keep your expenses low,
Yes.
get the community to support, partner as much as possible, because you don't have a lot of resources. By leveraging on the partners' resources,
Yep.
you can do more. Like 2 years back, we partnered with the National Trade Union Congress. We get access to many resources. We partner with all the 5 polytechnics. Similarly, they help us to do a lot of things. So that's how you can extend your impact further by partnership. Yeah.
I think you have gotten it in the slide, which I think are 2 very important factors. First is about teamwork. As mentioned, there are different players in the association, and then everyone has different interests. The question is, how can you steer everyone to move towards one direction? I think that would be very important, the test of teamwork. And secondly is action. So it boils down to, the benefits can be given and offered to the members or also community. So teamwork and action will be very crucial.
All right, thank you for that. So look, everyone in the room who's interested in joining, we'd really want your participation, your great minds, your innovation, your new ideas. You can actually scan this QR code and you can join the WhatsApp group that we've created. If you have any additional questions, you want to connect with me to join, just send me a message or talk to me after. Okay? Thank you very much, everyone.